Beneath crimson sunsets, colossal towers of stone loom against the horizon, their builders nameless, their purpose forgotten. They endure as monuments to riddles the earth refuses to surrender. Across the globe, echoes of the same enigma remain. In the jungles of Asia, stairways vanish into roots and vines. In the Pacific, entire villages rest beneath the waves, preserved in silence. High on European hills, circles of stone mark the dance of celestial bodies long past. Who designed these places? Were they calendars, temples, or something greater than either? The absence of answers makes the mystery even sharper. Now, imagine standing at the threshold of a darkened chamber, torch in hand, or brushing dirt from carvings unseen for centuries. You're not just watching history, you're part of it. And don't forget, follow this channel to walk further into the unknown. Then leave your mark comment, the time you're listening, and where in the world you are. Alexander the Great's lost tomb, a king without a grave. Under the glare of the Mediterranean sun, you wander through Alexandria's modern sprawl, trying to imagine the splendor of the ancient city that once housed the body of the world's most famous conqueror. Exhaust fumes mix with sea spray. Locals point you to a construction site near the Nabi Daniel Mosque, where rumors circle about a buried mausoleum. The hum of traffic never quite drowns out the mythical whispers that have drawn explorers here for centuries. It is hard to reconcile the humble concrete and steel reinforcements with the marble colonnades that must have stood here 2 millennia ago. You came to Alexandria after finding a fragment of Greek text in an antiquarian bookstore. The text alludes to a secret tomb beneath the city that was hidden by flood and earthquake. It contained a cryptic note from an archaeologist dated 1932, describing a sealed doorway under catacombs near the Serapeum. Drawn by the notion that something of Alexander could still exist, you contacted local officials and arranged access to the site. With a hard hat and a permit tucked into your pocket, you descend a rebar-framed shaft. The subterranean passage smells of wet earth and old limestone. Your boots slip on damp stones. Carved niches line the walls, some still containing pottery or cracked statues. At the far end of the tunnel, a marble slab blocks a chamber. It bears faint inscriptions worn by water. You run your hand across the letters and feel a familiar electric sensation. A small stone at the base has been removed, leaving a crawl space just wide enough for your shoulders. You wriggle through into a void. Your light reveals a room lined with polished granite. In its center, a sarcophagus lies shattered, empty except for sand. As you examine the tomb, a sudden rumbling reverberates through the bedrock. Dust clouds rise from the ceiling. The air seems to pulsate. Your light flickers and you hear water waves, perhaps crashing somewhere above. The floor tilts ever so slightly, as if the chamber is shifting. You feel dizzy and need to brace yourself against a wall. In the corner, a carved relief appears to depict Alexander with horns of Ammon. His eyes seem to follow you. For a moment, a metallic scent reminiscent of blood fills your nostrils. Then, as suddenly as it began, the sensation subsides, leaving you trembling in silence. Back on the surface, you cross-check notes from early explorers. The tomb of Alexander was said to have been moved several times, first from Memphis to Alexandria, later to a glass coffin on display, then to an unknown site when earthquakes reshaped the coast. Historical texts mention visits from Julius Caesar and Augustus. But then the trail goes cold. In libraries and museums, you find more references to later emperors who could not locate the tomb. The pattern suggests the burial was deliberately concealed, perhaps to protect it from looting. You begin to think the empty sarcophagus you found is another decoy. 3 main theories emerge. One posits that the body was moved to Constantinople or Venice, disguised as a saint to preserve it through Christian times. Another argues that floods destroyed the tomb and scattered his remains beneath modern Alexandria's water table. A more romantic notion suggests that Alexander's followers created multiple false burials to honor him, leaving his true corpse secreted in a remote desert tomb, perhaps near Siwa, where he was declared divine. None of these explanations feel satisfying, especially after standing in the empty chamber. Weeks later, you dream of a marble hall lit by oil lamps. You walk between columns and see a golden sarcophagus. When you reach to open it, the lid dissolves into sand, and you wake with your hands cupped, as if holding something precious. The smell of sea spray lingers in your room. On your next visit to a museum, you pass a Greek bust and swear its eyes follow you, just like those carved reliefs underground. It seems Alexander's tomb continues to hide not only in the earth, but in your imagination. Egypt's vanished underground labyrinth, a tunnel beneath memory. On the edge of the Fayum oasis, you stand amid broken columns and fallen statues that mark the site of Hawara. Herodotus wrote of a labyrinth nearby so vast and intricate that it rivaled the pyramids. He claimed it contained 3,000 chambers and underground passages. Archaeologists have searched for it for centuries, with only fragments of walls and floors found. The hot breeze carries the scent of reeds and lake water. You shade your eyes trying to picture a sprawling maze hidden beneath your feet. You were lured here by an article about ground-penetrating radar surveys that hinted at voids beneath Hawara. A local engineer emailed you scans showing regular patterns. He said the data was ignored by officials who feared destabilizing the site. He invited you to see the desert for yourself. Standing here, you hold printouts of the scans and sense the possibility of unseen spaces below. You walk toward a depression in the ground. A small hole reveals a staircase descending into darkness. Warm air wafts upward. You shine a flashlight and see mud brick walls. You climb down into a passage just tall enough to stand in. The air is thick with humidity. Hieroglyphs line the walls, many defaced. You notice holes where something was pried out, perhaps plaques or crystals. The floor slopes gently. Your footsteps echo. After several turns, the passage ends abruptly at a wall of packed sand. Your flashlight catches a faint draft coming through small gaps. Suddenly, a low rumbling resonates. The sand wall shifts slightly and grains fall like an hourglass. You step back. The air thickens. You feel a pressure in your ears as though the earth above is settling. The draft becomes a breeze carrying a smell of stale air and salt. You hear a distant splash like water in echoing chambers. The rumble ceases, leaving a heavy silence. Above ground, you research Herodotus's account. He wrote that the labyrinth served as a tomb and administrative center. He described corridors leading into one another, sculptures, and ceiling reliefs. Later writers could not find it. Archaeological reports from the 19th century describe canals flooding nearby tunnels. Modern surveys find anomalies but no entry points. The engineer explains that groundwater from the Nile might have destroyed passages. Skeptics say Herodotus exaggerated. The truth is buried with the labyrinth itself. Theories about the labyrinth include that it was dismantled for stone, collapsed due to unstable soils, or deliberately hidden. Some believe it never existed. Others think it still lies intact beneath silt, waiting for excavation. Fringe ideas suggest it leads to underground chambers containing unknown technology. The lack of definitive evidence fuels speculation. Your own descent into the passage hints at something larger, but sand and time obscure the way. Back home, you sometimes hear a faint rumble when lying in bed, like distant earth shifting. You dream of endless corridors twisting beneath deserts. The labyrinth remains elusive, a confluence of ancient writings and modern geophysics. You plan to return in the dry season when water tables drop, hoping for another crack between stones. Until then, the underground maze lives on in your mind. Cleopatra's missing tomb, where the queen sleeps. The waves of the Mediterranean lap gently against the shore near Alexandria, where fishermen cast nets from weathered boats. Nearby stands Taposiris Magna, a temple to Osiris now mostly ruins. In these crumbling stones, some believe Cleopatra VII and Mark Antony were buried. You walk among toppled columns and sandy courtyards, the scent of the sea mingling with dust. Despite centuries of looting and earthquakes, the aura of power and tragedy lingers. Your interest was piqued by a televised interview with a Dominican-born archaeologist who has been excavating Taposiris for years. She claimed to have found a tunnel leading to an underground chamber. Comments by skeptics dismissed the idea as a publicity stunt. A week later, you received an unsigned email containing photos of carved reliefs not yet public. The sender urged you to visit and decide for yourself. Curiosity overcame doubt, and you booked a flight. At the dig site, workers chip away at sandstone. You descend into a tunnel recently uncovered. The air is cool and smells of damp earth. Your headlamp illuminates carvings of cobras and lotus flowers. At the end of the passage, a doorway opens into a chamber. Inside, there is a platform carved from bedrock. No sarcophagus rests upon it. Instead, a pool of brackish water fills the center. A faint current flows. On the far wall, hieroglyphs read, "She who brings forth the sun." You feel goosebumps on your arms. The water ripples without wind. Suddenly, a gust blows through the tunnel from behind, though there is no exit. Your lamp flickers. The water in the pool bubbles briefly. You hear a whisper, maybe your own breath echoing. The walls seem to shift, the carved eyes of gods following you. Then the sensation passes. You realize your heart is racing. You note the coordinates and vow to revisit with sonar equipment. Later in Cairo's archives, you read that Octavian allowed Cleopatra's servants to bury her and Antony together. Accounts state the tomb was near a temple to Isis. Roman writers described a mausoleum filled with treasure later sealed. Archaeologists debate whether the tomb lies under modern Alexandria, now submerged, or somewhere along the Nile Delta. The Dominican excavators' hypothesis gains traction, but no definitive proof has been found. The deeper you dig, the more possibilities emerge. Theories about Cleopatra's resting place include the catacombs of Anfushi, underwater palace ruins, and secret vaults beneath the Library of Alexandria. Some think the tomb was destroyed by an earthquake and carried out to sea. Others believe it remains hidden under silt, waiting for technology to advance. There is also the suggestion that Octavian lied and that Cleopatra was cremated. Each idea changes how we view the end of her life and the beginning of Roman rule. In your hotel room, you dream of a dark chamber filled with sandalwood and the scent of lotus. A figure draped in gold motions you closer, but as you reach out, the floor turns to water. You wake to the sound of waves crashing. At breakfast, your spoon clinks against the bowl with a rhythm reminiscent of chanting. Cleopatra's tomb remains elusive, but the queen's narrative continues to ripple through time and within you. Amenhotep I's lost necropolis, ghosts of Thebes. As the late afternoon light bathes the cliffs of Deir el-Bahari in amber, you stand amid stone ruins and wind-scarred terraces. The Valley of the Kings lies just beyond the ridge, but you are drawn to a lesser-known slope where archaeologists believe Amenhotep was originally interred. Swirling sand stings your cheeks. The rare scent of blooming desert flowers mingles with the dryness and incongruous sweetness in an otherwise austere landscape. You were invited to this dig by a distant acquaintance, a scholar working on a doctoral thesis about royal burials. She sent you a fragmentary map found in an 18th century traveler's diary marked with a small X west of Deir el-Bahari. The diary claimed that local workers told stories of a hidden necropolis swallowed by collapsing cliffs. Sensing an opportunity to witness a discovery, you packed your bags and flew to Luxor. The map now flutters in your hand as you match its crude lines to the undulating wadi. Following the map, you squeeze through a narrow cleft between limestone boulders. The temperature drops and your skin prickles. Your flashlight reveals a tunnel supported by wooden beams, now cracked and brittle. The air smells of dust and age. You step over pottery shards and broken amphorae. At the end of the corridor, a chamber opens up its walls painted with faded scenes of the afterlife. In the center lies a sarcophagus of quartzite, empty, its lid pushed aside. Carved into the walls are spells from the Book of the Dead. You hear a distant whisper, perhaps one through cracks, saying words you almost recognize. As you walk around the sarcophagus, a low groaning emanates from the rock above. Pebbles fall like rain. A vibration grows beneath your feet, accompanied by a deep bass hum. The painted figures on the walls seem to ripple. Your light flickers and you see just for a moment a procession of priests carrying a gilded coffin through this very chamber. Their faces turn towards you, eyes hollow yet penetrating. Then the vision shatters. A small rock strikes your shoulder, and you take that as your cue to leave before the ceiling collapses. Back at camp, you pore through historical accounts of Amenhotep worse. His mummy found in the Deir el-Bahari cache showed signs of being reburied after tomb robbers struck, but no one knows where his original burial was located. Letters from the 19th century describe local lore about a lost necropolis dedicated to this king, complete with hidden tombs and unplundered treasures. In university archives, you find references to tunnels and a collapsed wadi, reported by early Egyptologists, but never fully investigated. Your discovery aligns with those accounts. Theories about Amenhotep's burial site diverge. Some Egyptologists believe it was in the Valley of the Kings, and subsequently lost when priests relocated mummies to protect them from robbers. Others suggest a separate necropolis behind the mortuary temple of Hatshepsut, where he was originally honored. A more esoteric theory holds that his tomb was deliberately hidden by magicians who placed protective spells on it to make it invisible. Your experience in the hidden chamber, with its whispers and visions, makes you wonder about that last possibility. At night, dreams of chanting priests and collapsing tunnels intermingle. Sometimes you wake with sand in your mouth and the echo of voices calling your name. The wind through your window occasionally carries a whiff of blooming desert flowers. The necropolis may remain lost, but it has left its imprint on you. You plan to return, but part of you is uneasy, unsure whether the dead want to be found. Curse of the Pharaohs. Shadows over Tut's tomb. Sunlight filters through the dust motes in the Valley of the Kings as you descend into tomb KV62. The walls glow with gilded hieroglyphs, and the scent of ancient resin lingers. This is Tutankhamun's burial place, discovered in 1922. The story of a curse followed soon after, as several expedition members died mysterious deaths. You run your fingers along the cool limestone and feel a tremor of anticipation mixed with respect. The whispered legend of a curse still echoes after a century. You were invited by a documentary crew looking to film a special on modern Egyptology myths. They wanted a writer's perspective. Before you left, an anonymous note slid under your hotel door, warned, "Do not disturb what lies within." It made you pause, but curiosity won. Now, deep underground, you recall that warning as you approach the sealed inner chamber where Tut's golden coffin once lay. Inside, the air is thick and still. You hear the faint hum of equipment from the film crew. Suddenly, a bulb bursts, plunging everyone into darkness for a second. The temperature seems to drop. You smell ozone. A crew member gasps and points to his arm. A rash blooms like welts. Another begins to cough. A microphone picks up a faint whisper, though no one speaks. The lights flicker back on. Everyone looks shaken. Rational minds attribute it to dust and nerves, yet the timing feels uncanny. Outside, you review historical accounts. Lord Carnarvon died from an infected mosquito bite shortly after the tomb's opening. A handful of others succumbed to illness or accidents. Newspapers spun these into a tale of curse, ignoring those who lived long lives. Scientists now blame bacteria and mold sealed in tombs. Nonetheless, the story persists, fueled by our love of consequence. You interview Egyptologists who shrug at curses but still take precautions, wearing masks and gloves when entering sealed spaces. Theories about the curse vary. Some think ancient priests did indeed inscribe spells to protect the dead, releasing toxins when disturbed. Others believe psychological suggestion. Belief in a curse causes stress that weakens the immune system. A more fantastical idea is that supernatural forces guard the pharaohs. Most deaths have rational explanations, but coincidences feed the legend. The anonymous note you received underscores the power of belief. Back home, you catch a cold. Your throat scratches. A glass breaks inexplicably in the kitchen. You laugh nervously but cannot help thinking of Tut's tomb. At night, you dream of being wrapped in linens, your mouth stuffed with amulets. You wake sweating. The curse is likely a myth, but it leaves a residue nonetheless. Respect, wonder, and a hint of fear blend when we peer into the graves of kings. D.B. Cooper, vanishing into the clouds. Rain streaks the windows of the Boeing 727 as you fly over the Pacific Northwest. This is the same route taken in November 1971 by a man who purchased a ticket under the name Dan Cooper. He handed a note to a flight attendant claiming he had a bomb, extorted $200,000, and then parachuted into the night, never to be found. Sitting in your seat, you imagine the adrenaline of those on board. The seatbelt sign dings. You glance out at the endless forests and rivers below. You were contacted by a retired FBI agent who spent years on the Cooper case. He invited you to fly the same flight path during bad weather, hoping to understand the hijacker's escape. He believed fresh eyes might notice overlooked factors. With a worn file of evidence, he met you at the airport. Now, mid-flight, he points out the approximate jump zone near the Lewis River. Lightning flashes in the distance. Your palms sweat. The agent recounts details. The hijacker was calm, polite, chain-smoked. He requested that the plane fly at 10,000 feet with flaps down. After receiving the ransom in Seattle, he allowed passengers to leave and ordered the crew back into the air. At 8:13 p.m., the plane's rear stairs lowered and a pressure bump was recorded. That was likely the moment he jumped. You imagine standing at the open stairwell, wind howling rain pelting your face, the ground invisible in darkness. The agent hands you a parachute harness to feel its weight. Suddenly, the plane dips. Turbulence shakes the cabin. Your stomach flips. For a split second, you feel weightless. You grip the armrests and think about leaping into that void on purpose. You glance at the emergency exit lights and picture a figure slipping out. The clouds outside glow as lightning illuminates them. Then the ride smooths, but your heart rate stays high. In the days that follow, you delve into the case files. Thousands were interviewed. Dollars from the ransom were found years later on a riverbank. Suspects ranged from ex-paratroopers to airline employees to missing fathers. None were conclusively linked. The parachutes were outdated. Survival was unlikely yet possible. You visit the drop zone and see dense forest, steep ravines, and the cold, fast river. It feels like a place one could vanish forever. Theories about D.B. Cooper abound. Some think he died shortly after jumping his remains undiscovered. Others claim he lived on a pension in Oregon. There are tales of money spent in small towns or hidden under floorboards. A few believe he was a rogue CIA agent. Each theory reveals more about the storyteller than Cooper himself. The agent confesses his own favorite suspect, a quiet Vietnam veteran who resembled the composite sketch, but admits the case may never close. Weeks later, you receive a postcard with a cartoon of a man with a parachute and the words, "I'm still free." There is no return address. You grin despite yourself. When you fly now, you look down at forests and wonder if a man once slipped between trees and lived a secret life. D.B. Cooper jumped into myth as surely as he jumped from that plane, and the mystery floats on like a parachute in the wind. Egyptian obelisks, ancient precision, monolithic mysteries. Granite shafts pierce the Egyptian sky at Karnak, and Luxor monuments carved from single pieces of stone weighing hundreds of tons. You stand in their shadows, craning your neck to see the capstones glinting in the sun. Each side is smooth inscriptions aligned with astronomical precision. The quarries where they were hewn lie miles away. Questions bubble up. How were these monoliths carved, transported, and erected with tools of copper and stone? The air is dry, carrying the scent of dust and camel leather. You came here after a stonemason sent you photographs of tool marks on unfinished obelisks at Aswan. He claimed modern machines would struggle to replicate the smoothness. He invited you to feel the surfaces. Intrigued, you joined a group tour to Aswan's quarry. The unfinished obelisk lies there cracked, but still attached to bedrock. Its trench reveals marks like massive scoopings. Running your hand along the stone, you feel parallel grooves. The mason points out that they arc consistently as if cut by a rotating drill rather than hammered chisels. At Karnak, you inspect an upright obelisk. The hieroglyphs are incised with stunning accuracy. A guide explains that it was raised using ramps and sand pits. You imagine thousands of laborers hauling and placing the stone precisely. But the precision of the faces and the alignment with solstices puzzle you. The granite contains quartz harder than the copper tools available. You recall the mason's remark. It's as if they had diamond saws. Suddenly, a gust of desert wind kicks up. Sand swirls around your feet. You shield your eyes. In the haze, you think you see workers pulling ropes, voices shouting in a tongue you do not understand. The obelisk seems to shimmer. Then the wind settles and the modern world returns. The stone stands immovable, but the vision leaves you unsettled. In Cairo's museum, you study ancient texts on building methods. They describe levering with wooden sledges, water to reduce friction, and sacrificial ceremonies. Engineers explain how simple machines amplified human strength. Yet some questions linger. How were surfaces polished to mirror smoothness? Why are tool marks sometimes inconsistent with copper chisels? Some researchers propose lost techniques like stone pounding with diorite balls. Others suggest the Egyptians used abrasives and persistence. Fringe theorists whisper of sonic levitation or extraterrestrial help. Theories range from the mundane to the mystical. Most scholars believe human ingenuity, organization, and time were enough. A minority argue that advanced knowledge of astronomy and geometry played a bigger role than acknowledged. A few point to the presence of vitrification on some stones as evidence of unknown technology. The debate mirrors the obelisks themselves, grounded in stone yet pointing skyward. As you leave, the sun sets, casting long shadows of the obelisks across the temple floor. You run your hand over a granite face one more time, feeling its coolness. At home, you hold a small granite paperweight, and marvel that it is from the same material, albeit carved with diamond tools. The ancient pillars remain a testament to human ambition, and perhaps to methods we have yet to rediscover. Axeman of New Orleans, 1918 to 1919. Jazz, fear and an unknown hand. The humid air of New Orleans is thick with the aroma of coffee and the distant strains of jazz. Gas lamps cast uneven light onto cobblestone streets. In the evening, you find yourself in the 7th Ward, where row houses stand shoulder to shoulder, their shutters closed tight. A century ago, these streets were gripped by terror as an anonymous killer slipped through unlocked doors, wielding an axe left at the scene. Even now, locals speak of him in hushed tones. You can almost hear the echo of those anxious footsteps. Your arrival in the city was prompted by a battered envelope delivered without a return address. Inside was a photocopy of a newspaper article from 1999 describing a letter purportedly from the Axeman. Scrawled in the margin was a note: "There's more in the archives. Ask for the mezzanine file." Intrigued by the cryptic message, you arranged a visit to the Times-Picayune's old file room. The archivist led you past dusty cabinets to a hidden section where boxes of unsorted clippings waited. You leaf through brittle pages and find police reports rarely seen by the public. One describes an eyewitness who saw a tall shadow with a limp. Another mentions a jazz tune that always played before an attack. As you read, you hear a faint melody drifting through the archives. At first, you think it's from a nearby radio, but the notes are unusual, discordant. Your pulse quickens. You follow the sound and discover a small phonograph spinning despite not being plugged in. The record on its turntable is unlabeled. The song is hauntingly familiar, like the one mentioned in the report. You feel the hair on your neck stand up. Walking back to your hotel, you notice the streetlights flicker, shadows lengthen unnaturally. A stray cat darts across your path, hissing. The humid night suddenly feels cold. You pass a doorway and see an old axe leaning just inside. For a second, you think you catch a glimpse of a figure in a wide-brimmed hat. When you look again, the porch is empty. Your heart pounds. A car backfires and you nearly jump out of your skin. You hurry inside and bolt the lock. The next morning, you study microfilm of editorials begging the Axeman to stop. One letter from a jazz band offered to play all night if he promised not to kill. On March 19th, no murders occurred, perhaps because music filled the air. Police files suggest the attacks may have targeted Italian grocers, possibly due to mafia feuds or xenophobia. Yet the randomness of his victims and the theatrical letter to the press point to someone who wanted attention as much as blood. The deeper you dig, the more tangled the motives become. Suspects included disgruntled ex-employees, mob enforcers, and even a supernatural entity. Some locals believe the Axeman was a spirit that could pass through walls, citing the lack of forced entry. Others thought he was a jazz musician, using his craft as cover. A modern theory posits that multiple killers were at work exploiting the hysteria. None were ever convicted. Theories rise and fall like crescendos in a jazz improvisation, leaving the audience with unanswered questions. Late at night, you lie awake listening to the creaks of the old building. Your neighbor's phonograph plays a syncopated tune, and for a heartbeat you think you hear faint footsteps outside your door. You remember the unease of the archival melody. The Axeman case seeps into your dreams, each one ending with the sharp clank of metal on wood. New Orleans returns to its lively rhythms by day, but in the small hours the city still hears the phantom notes of fear. Ball lightning, spheres of fire in the storm. Thunder rolls across the Appalachian foothills as you stand on a wooden porch, watching sheets of rain obscure the tree line. A flash splits the sky, and for a heartbeat, night turns to day. You have come here to see a phenomenon that has baffled scientists: luminous orbs that appear during storms. Locals call them ghost lights. The smell of ozone fills your nostrils. The air is heavy with humidity and tension. You grip the railing tightly. An old friend from college, now a physics professor, invited you after his research assistant captured a strange light ball on a trail camera. He sent the footage, and you saw a glowing sphere float through a field, weaving as if alive. He wanted a writer present to document a field experiment, hoping lightning would strike twice. So, you drove deep into the countryside with a portable lightning detector, a high-speed camera, and a head full of curiosity. As the storm intensifies, the detector beeps frantically. You focus your camera. Suddenly, a glowing orb emerges from the darkness. It is the size of a grapefruit, luminescent white with swirls of blue at its edges. It hovers at eye level, moving erratically, yet purposefully. You feel the hair on your arms stand up. The ball drifts toward a metal gate, passes through it without disturbance, then zooms upwards and disappears with a popping sound. In its wake, there is a faint smell of sulfur. Your heart races and your friend whoops in disbelief. Moments later, a deafening crack splits the air. A tree nearby explodes as lightning strikes. A shockwave hits your chest. Your ears ring. For a second, you see multiple orbs dancing around the branches like will-o'-the-wisps. Their glow is hypnotic. Then they vanish. Rain drenches you, and your camera screen shows static. You realize you have just witnessed something rare and poorly understood. It feels like glimpsing a secret aspect of nature. Back inside, dripping and exhilarated, you pore over literature on ball lightning. Accounts go back centuries, describing orbs that enter through chimneys, bounce along train tracks, and even disappear into the ground. Most scientists attribute them to plasma formations from lightning, but no one has reproduced them reliably in a lab. In your footage, the sphere's behavior defies simple plasma explanations. It moves through a gate without arcing. It seemed to seek something. Theories range from vaporized silicon reacting with oxygen to oxidized nanoparticles, microwaves from lightning, interacting with metal structures, and even hallucinations induced by electromagnetic fields. Some fringe thinkers propose that ball lightning is a conscious entity or a portal to another dimension. Your rational mind leans toward natural explanations, yet the memory of that floating orb is hard to square with textbook diagrams. In the weeks following, every storm draws your gaze. Sometimes you catch a flash of light and your heart leaps, only to realize it is just a reflection. One night, you dream of glowing spheres floating through your room, leaving singed circles on the rug. You wake to smell something burning, but the house is fine. Ball lightning remains elusive, but your brief encounter has altered your relationship with thunderstorms forever. Brown Mountain Lights. Ghostly glows of North Carolina, night falls over the Blue Ridge Mountains, cloaking the peaks in inky darkness. You are perched on an overlook along the Blue Ridge Parkway, eyes fixed on Brown Mountain. Locals say that when conditions are right, mysterious lights float above the ridge. The air is crisp, carrying the scent of pine. Crickets chirp. A family nearby murmurs in anticipation. Your camera sits ready on a tripod. Everyone waits, breath held for the unknown. You decided to camp here after a park ranger shared his own story around a campfire. He spoke of orbs that danced in the valley, sometimes coalescing and separating, changing colors from white to red. A retired geologist, he dismissed swamp gas and car lights. He whispered of ancient native legends and strange afterglows from quartz. His tale lodged in your mind, and soon you found yourself driving along twisting mountain roads with a tent and a sense of adventure. Hours into the evening, as your eyes begin to tire, a faint light flares. Then another. Two orbs rise from the trees and float horizontally before merging and splitting again. They glow yellowish, then shift to a soft blue. They hover at a consistent height, not headlights, not lanterns. The hairs on your arms tingle. The orbs drift for several minutes, then blink out. A collective gasp emerges from the watchers. You check your camera footage and see the lights clearly captured. Excitement and unease mingle. Moments later, a stronger glow appears. A single ball of light shoots straight up, pauses, then darts sideways at impossible speeds. It leaves a streak like a comet trail. Your jaw drops. The kids nearby squeal. Someone murmurs a prayer. The night seems charged. Cicadas fall silent. You feel the sensation of static in your hair. Then, as quickly as it came, the light fades. The darkness feels heavier, as if the mountain absorbed something. The next day, you research explanations. Scientists have proposed electrical discharge from quartz reflections of car headlights and atmospheric conditions causing mirages. None fully account for the light's behaviors, rising vertically, changing colors, moving against wind. Folklore speaks of ghostly lanterns carried by lost lovers or spectral warriors. Astronomers dismiss UFO claims. As you weigh each theory, the image of the blue orb lingers. Theories remain speculative. Some suggest gas pockets igniting, others think it is triboluminescence from tectonic stress. There are those who tie the lights to the Brown Mountain Mine's history. Conspiracy enthusiasts propose interdimensional portals. You balance skepticism with wonder. No explanation fully explains the timing and patterns you witnessed. When you leave the mountains, car headlights in the city take on a new significance. Occasionally you glimpse a flare at the edge of your vision and turn expecting to see a light floating in the distance. The memory of those ghostly glows sits at the edge of your thoughts, like the faint hum of cicadas, always there in quiet moments. The Brown Mountain lights remain a luminous mystery that calls you back to the dark ridge. Collapse of Egypt's Old Kingdom. Dynastic fall of stone. Standing before the weathered step pyramid at Saqqara, you feel the weight of 5,000 years pressing down. Once this pyramid was clad in gleaming limestone and surrounded by bustling workshops. Now, desert sands creep up its sides. Egypt's Old Kingdom built monuments that have stood the test of time, yet its political structure crumbled after centuries of stability. The wind whispers through broken walls. A hawk circles overhead. Visitors snap photos unaware of the drama that unfolded here millennia ago. A research grant brought you to Cairo to study climate records in ancient papyri. While scanning a document in a museum vault, you found a note in the margin describing a famine that lasted many years and hints that the river turned away from Memphis. You shared the find with a historian who told you of similar references scattered in inscriptions. Together you planned a field trip to sites where evidence might point to the Old Kingdom's decline. You now stand at Saqqara, ready to test theories against ancient bricks. Inside a tomb chapel, reliefs show scenes of plentiful harvests and festivals, but deeper in the complex graffiti depicts thin figures and empty granaries. You run your fingers over etched hieroglyphs that tell of collapsed dikes. Suddenly a gust blows through, carrying dust into your eyes. You blink, and for an instant the air shimmers. You feel dizzy. The walls seem to squeeze inward, and you hear distant cries of farmers. The temperature drops. You steady yourself, and the sensation dissipates, leaving you standing alone among carved cows and grain bundles. That evening, you and the historian review evidence. Climate studies suggest a severe drought around 2200 BCE. Nile floods failed. Central authority weakened as governors claimed autonomy. Tomb inscriptions record appeals to gods. Archaeology shows abandoned villages. The correlation between environmental stress and political fragmentation becomes clear. Yet some records speak of invasions by Libyans or nomads adding a human threat. The complexity of the collapse deepens. Scholars propose multiple factors. One school stresses climate change. Reduced rainfall led to famine, causing social unrest and the weakening of pharaonic authority. Another highlights administrative issues. The pyramids drained resources, local officials gained power, and the royal house could not control them. A third points to external invasions. Likely it was a confluence. The note you found once a marginalia hints at a populace aware of the Nile's centrality to life. When the river faltered, so did the world. As you leave the site, the sun sets behind the pyramids, casting long shadows. You hear the distant sound of water, though no canal is nearby. That night, you dream of a dry riverbed filled with the footprints of desperate people. You wake thirsty. The collapse of the Old Kingdom is not just an academic lesson, but a warning about the fragility of complex societies dependent on natural cycles. You sip water thoughtfully, aware of the river's echo in your daily life. Disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa, 1975. The Union leader vanishes. A rusted sign reading, "Maucus Red Fox," hangs over a nondescript parking lot in Bloomfield Township, Michigan. Once a popular steakhouse, it is now a strip mall. On July 30th, 1975, former Teamsters president Jimmy Hoffa waited here for a meeting that never took place because he vanished. Standing by the faded pavement, you watch cars whiz past on Telegraph Road. Most drivers do not look twice at the spot, but to those who know the story, it is hallowed ground for speculation. An old acquaintance of Hoffa's family contacted you through a friend. He revealed he had found an unmailed letter in Hoffa's handwriting, hidden behind a wall in his father's garage. The letter hinted at tension with mafia associates and named two men as potential threats. The acquaintance wondered if this letter could reopen the case and wanted an outsider to examine it. You agreed, fascinated by Hoffa's larger-than-life persona and his mysterious end. You drive to the former restaurant site with a copy of the letter. The sun beats down. A plaque marks the place where Hoffa was last seen. You imagine him pacing, checking his watch. You walk over to a line of trees where some say he was forced into a car. The grass is unremarkable, but you feel a heaviness. A car backfires, making you jump. A bird calls. You read the letter again. Its words are cryptic but urgent. "They think I won't come back," it says. A chill runs through you. Later that evening, you meet the acquaintance in a quiet bar. He shares rumors Hoffa was taken to a house, strangled, then cremated. He was buried under Giant Stadium. He was processed in a meat grinder. Every tip the FBI pursued led to dead ends. Forensics teams dug up backyards and fields. Nothing. The acquaintance confesses he is haunted by the idea of unmarked graves. He produces a napkin with coordinates scribbled on it, given to him by a dying Teamster years earlier. "Do you think we should tell someone?" he asks. The next day you dig through archives. Hoffa's sentence for jury tampering and fraud, his commutation by Nixon, his attempts to regain Union power, his enemies in organized crime, all paint a picture of a man who knew too much. FBI files are thick with suspects. Wiretaps record veiled threats. A theory emerges that mob bosses ordered him killed to prevent his return. Yet some insist he fled. The letter you hold indicates he knew danger loomed and still went to that parking lot. Speculation is endless. Some say he lies under cement slabs of interstate highways, others that his remains are in a Florida swamp. Conspiracy theories link his disappearance to the CIA, Cuban exile groups, and more. Law enforcement believes he was killed soon after abduction. Without a body, closure eludes both investigators and family. The letter adds to the mystery but does not resolve it. Driving away from the old restaurant, you catch your reflection in the rear-view mirror and imagine Hoffa doing the same that day. Your phone buzzes with a new message, a photo of a partially uncovered barrel in a field captioned, "Could this be it?" You debate calling authorities. At night, you dream of cement trucks pouring over a shallow grave, while voices argue in another room. Hoffa's fate remains unknown, a mystery paved over with time and silence. Bigfoot, shadow of the Northwoods. A cool mist hangs between towering red cedars as you trek through the Pacific Northwest. Moss carpets fallen logs and the scent of earth is rich and loamy. This dense forest has birthed legends of a large bipedal creature that leaves giant footprints and emits thunderous roars. Locals call it Bigfoot or Sasquatch. You follow a narrow game trail, aware of every snap of twig beneath your boots. The silence is profound, save for distant bird calls and the drip of water from leaves. An envelope of plaster casts arrived at your door months ago, anonymous except for a note. See for yourself. The casts showed huge human-like footprints, 16 inches long, with dermal ridges visible. Included was a map to a remote valley in Washington state, and a time exactly 3 a.m. the next full moon. Driven by curiosity and a love of the unexplained, you embarked on the journey. Now under the canopy of Douglas firs, you check your watch and listen. As the moon peaks, a low howl rises from somewhere deep in the forest. It is not coyote or owl, but a long, mournful wail that raises goosebumps. You hold your breath. Branches crack, heavy footfalls approach. A shadow moves between trees, tall and broad-shouldered. You catch a whiff of wet fur and musk. Your camera lens fogs. The figure pauses, turns, and for a moment, 2 amber eyes reflect your flashlight. Then, with surprising grace, the shape melts into the darkness. Leaves rustle, and the heavy steps fade away. A sudden rock falls from a cliff nearby, startling you. You spin around to see nothing but darkness. The forest feels alive and watchful. You set up an audio recorder and capture knocks echoing through the trees like someone striking wood on wood. A faint answering knock returns from far away. You feel as though you are being triangulated. Your senses heighten. Every rustle becomes a possible footstep. The air temperature drops slightly and a thin mist rises from the ground. Back at camp, you compare your recordings with archives. Many witnesses describe similar howls and wood knocks. Native stories speak of forest keepers who live between worlds. Scientists are skeptical, pointing out lack of physical evidence, no bones, no bodies. Hoaxes have been exposed, yet the number of consistent accounts is compelling. You learn that hair samples submitted for DNA analysis sometimes show unknown primate markers, though results are often disputed. Theories vary widely. Some believe Bigfoot is a relic hominid like Gigantopithecus. Others think it is a spirit or guardian of nature. There are suggestions it uses infrasound to evade detection. Skeptics attribute sightings to bears' misidentification or elaborate pranks. The legend thrives at the intersection of myth and science, fueled by the human desire for wonder. Long after you leave the forest, the image of those amber eyes stays with you. On quiet nights, you hear phantom knocks in your house and pause, listening. Occasionally, you catch a whiff of earth and fur on the breeze and feel the urge to turn around. Whether Bigfoot is real or a projection of our need to believe in wilderness, your experience in the Northwoods remains potent and mysterious. Jack the Ripper, 1888, Shadow in Whitechapel. London's Whitechapel district is bustling during the day, but at night narrow lanes and gas lamps cast long shadows. In 1888, a series of brutal murders of women terrorized the East End. The killer sent taunting letters signed Jack the Ripper. Standing on Dorset Street, you imagine the cobblestones slick with rain and fear. The smell of coal smoke and damp brick fills your lungs. Modern shops line the street, yet the past feels palpable. A box of Victorian ephemera purchased at an estate sale contained a sealed envelope addressed to a Constable Aberline. Inside was a letter, written in a spidery hand, claiming to be from Mary Jane Kelly, the Ripper's final victim. The letter was dated weeks after her death and described meeting a man who talked about medical dissections. You brought the letter to a historian who suggested it could be a hoax or a clue. To investigate, you take a late-night walking tour with a guide who knows every alley. The guide points out Mitre Square, Hanbury Street, and other murder sites. He speaks of organ removal, suggesting surgical skill. As you listen, a fog rolls in muffling sound. Footsteps echo behind you, but when you turn, no one is there. A cat darts under a lamppost. The guide stops at Miller's Court, Mary Jane Kelly's lodging. Your phone buzzes as an unknown number texts. Do not look back. You spin around instinctively. The alley is empty, yet the hairs on your neck stand up. Later in a pub, you compare theories. Suspects ranged from doctors to royals to American serial killers. The police files include witness descriptions of caped men, sailors, and butchers. The letter you found, if authentic, would indicate a victim wrote posthumously a near impossibility. Perhaps someone used her name to mislead investigators. Or maybe the date was wrong. The historian notes that Mary Kelly's body was mutilated beyond recognition. The idea that she survived sparks debate. Research reveals a web of social factors: overcrowding, poverty, sex work, anti-Semitism. The press sensationalized the crimes, fueling hysteria. Letters signed from hell were likely hoaxes. Modern scholars propose suspects using new forensic methods, but none have been definitively proven. The constable's letter, if real, might be the work of a prankster. Yet the chills you felt in the alley linger, as if echoing fear through time. Theories continue to emerge: a surgeon, a royal conspiracy, an artist. Each possibility is compelling, each flawed. DNA analysis of stamps has produced inconclusive results. The lack of certainty allows the myth of Jack the Ripper to endure. The letter to Constable Aberline remains a curiosity, perhaps just another piece of Victorian sensationalism. When you walk down foggy streets now, you find yourself glancing over your shoulder. Gaslight flares feel sinister. A crisp letter in a museum display case catches your eye. Your phone sometimes receives texts from unknown numbers that read like Victorian prose. Jack the Ripper fades into history, yet clings to the edges of London's nights, a shadowy figure who refuses to be identified. The Abydos King List Mystery. Pharaohs erased from time. You step through the cool shadows of the Temple of Seti, the limestone damp beneath your hands. Bas-reliefs of dynasties past surround you. Your guide mentions casually that one wall inside holds a list of all rulers of Egypt, yet something about his tone feels guarded. When you finally stand before the carved register, the empty spaces between names seem louder than the hieroglyphs themselves. The air is still the scent of old incense and limestone, heavy as you trace the timeline with your eyes. Names vanish. History folds back on itself. In that silent gallery, time seems manipulated, and you begin to sense you are a witness to more than just a list. An archivist pulls you aside and slides a discreet papyrus into your hand. It is a copy of an anonymous letter implying that Seti's inscriptions deliberately omitted certain pharaohs. The letter mentions political motives and ritual curses. You agree to meet the writer in the temple undercroft at midnight, compelled by curiosity and a desire to witness what official plaques ignore. Descending a steep staircase, you emerge into a chamber carved directly into the bedrock. Torches flicker against carved gods and goddesses, their eyes seeming to watch you. The stone floor holds faint impressions of many feet. The guide's whisper is swallowed by thick walls. The papyrus describes hidden recesses behind certain panels. You see hairline cracks where sunlight never reaches. The smell down here is of old water and the residual heat of summer trapped deep under the temple. Outside, the desert is cooling, but here time has its own temperature. As you move closer to the panel, you hear a soft rustle as if the hieroglyphs themselves are shifting. Your flashlight sweeps across a line of cartouches and pauses where there should be a name. Instead, there is a smooth rectangle carved out and plastered over. You run your fingers along the patch. For a moment, you feel a tingling in your fingertips like static electricity. The silence seems to amplify your heartbeat. You lift the plaster gently and see faded outlines, glyphs scratched out deliberately. It is a physical erasure of a ruler's identity. The weight of centuries presses down upon you. Without warning, the torches dim. You smell ozone and hear a rhythmic dripping that wasn't there before. A breeze moves through the chamber, though there is no apparent opening carrying with it whispers in an ancient tongue. The shadows from the columns elongate, distorting into unfamiliar forms. You feel a pressure on your chest as if the air has thickened. Your guide murmurs a prayer. For a fleeting moment, the plastered names seem to glow faintly, and the erased pharaohs call out to be acknowledged. Then it passes, leaving you shaken. Back in daylight, you research late into the night. You find that the removed names align with rulers associated with periods of turmoil. Hatshepsut's defiance, Akhenaten's religious reforms, Smenkhkare's brief rule. In faded scrolls and scattered museum archives, you piece together that Seti I may have sought to legitimize his own lineage by scrubbing away predecessors deemed heretical. The more you dig, the more you realize that history is written by those who survive, and the omissions speak as loudly as the inscriptions. You keep hearing the drip from the hidden chamber echoing in your head. Scholars propose different theories. Some believe the king list was merely symbolic, designed to align Seti's legacy with certain dynastic ideals and exclude temporary rulers. Others argue that religious zealots destroyed the names to erase heretical practices. A fringe hypothesis suggests a more mystical purpose, that the erased names were part of a ritual to imprison their souls, their memory kept out of the afterlife. Each theory opens another doorway, and you feel the labyrinth of possibilities growing. In dreams, you revisit that undercroft. The erased cartouches bleed ink and voices chant names you don't recognize. When you wake, dust clings to your fingers, though you are miles away. You catch glimpses of empty rectangles on billboards, blank spaces where words should be. The Abydos king list continues to edit your world, reminding you that history is as much about forgetting as remembering. Black Dahlia, 1947. The case that haunts Los Angeles. Los Angeles in the late afternoon hums with traffic and ambition. Billboards glow as the sun sets over palm-lined streets. On a vacant lot in Leimert Park, weeds grow tall, where in January 1947, a passerby discovered the mutilated body of Elizabeth Short. She would become known forever as the Black Dahlia. You stand at the spot now, empty except for a single palm tree, and feel a breeze off the distant Pacific. Cars rush by oblivious, but the ground seems to hold on to secrets. Your fascination with this case started with a shoebox of clippings found in your late grandfather's attic. He had been a cub reporter and kept notes on the murder. In the box, a letter postmarked 1947 boasted, "I did it." The handwriting matched a note sent to police by the self-proclaimed killer. You also found a scrap of a map marking a downtown address. Curiosity and a family connection spurred you to Los Angeles. You rent a car and drive to the city's old neighborhoods, map in hand. The address on the map leads to an Art Deco building that once housed a doctor's office. You push open the heavy door. The lobby smells of varnish and time. Mailboxes line the wall. One nameplate is scratched out. As you climb the stairs, your footfalls echo. On the third floor, a hallway stretches into darkness. A light flickers at the end, buzzing softly. You sense you are being watched. A door creaks open slightly. A draft carries the scent of antiseptic. You glimpse a room with a surgical lamp dangling over a table. Then the light snaps off and the door closes. Goosebumps spread down your arms. Walking back to your car, you pass the Biltmore Hotel, where Elizabeth Short was last seen alive. Its lobby glistens with chandeliers and polished marble. You imagine her sitting here waiting for someone who never arrived. Outside, a homeless man strums a guitar, playing an eerie melody. You feel a chill despite the warm evening. A police siren wails in the distance. You look around at the glittering city and think of the darkness that seeped between its cracks. In the archives of the Los Angeles Public Library, you examine microfilm of newspapers. The case attracted rampant speculation. Suspects range from doctors to movie directors to drifters. Some journalists fabricated clues. Police notes mention a person of interest who worked at the downtown location you visited. He was never charged. Autopsy reports reveal surgical precision, feeding the theory that her killer had medical training. As you read, you sense the frustration of detectives who followed endless leads to dead ends. Theories persist. Some claim the Black Dahlia was killed by a serial murderer who also committed other unsolved crimes in Los Angeles. Others believe it was a crime of passion, covered up by powerful friends. There is speculation that a sadistic doctor experimented on her. A retired detective wrote a book accusing his own father. Each theory fits part of the puzzle but leaves gaps. The lack of resolution invites endless conjecture. At night, you dream of dark alleyways and flickering neon. A woman in black beckons from a doorway, her face obscured. You wake with a taste of copper in your mouth. The Black Dahlia case has absorbed many who tried to solve it, including you. Whenever you drive past the quiet lot in Limert Park, you feel a tug as if the ground is asking you to listen. The wind whispers, but the words are indistinct. Mystery of the Saqqara sarcophagi, coffins and colors. In 20, Egyptian archaeologists opened a shaft at Saqqara and found dozens of brightly painted wooden sarcophagi stacked perfectly sealed for 500 years. Each coffin's colors were vibrant faces serene. You stand at the site under a canvas awning, the desert sun beating down. The air smells of dust and cedar. Workers carefully brush away sand. The sheer number of coffins shocks even seasoned excavators. How and why they were preserved in such quantity remains a puzzle. You were invited by a conservator who noticed unusual resins on the coffin's surfaces. She thought your narrative might help communicate the scientific importance. You descend into the shaft with a team. Wooden coffins line niches like books on a shelf. Hieroglyphs state names, professions, and prayers. One face looks uncannily lifelike. You feel as if dozens of eyes are watching from across millennia. Examining a coffin, you see intricate patterns. The wood is cedar from Lebanon, expensive even then. The colors azure, crimson, green are vivid. The conservator explains that natural resins sealed in moisture, preventing decay. She places a sample under a microscope and notes compounds not typically found in Egyptian coffins. Suddenly, a faint scent of frankincense wafts up. You inhale and feel lightheaded. For a second, you hear chanting again. Then the moment passes. Outside, you study steles. Many refer to a crisis, perhaps famine or invasion. Some scholars speculate that families collectively sealed these coffins as a protective measure. Others think the shaft was a communal burial for priests. The resins used may be a secret recipe lost to time. The conservator mentions that resin similarities exist with ingredients from the Levant. Trade connections with Phoenicia emerge as an undercurrent in your notes. Explanations vary. One theory posits an outbreak of disease led to mass burials. Another suggests these were stock coffins awaiting future deaths, stored like inventory. A fringe idea claims the resins were part of an experimental preservation technique. The preservation is so good that mummies' tattoos are visible. The shaft's purpose remains contested, each coffin telling both a personal and collective story. When you leave, the colors stay vivid in your mind. You dream of painted faces opening their eyes. The scent of resin sometimes surprises you when you open a cedar box at home. The Saqqara sarcophagi remind you that sometimes answers lie not in kings, but in ordinary people given extraordinary burials, and that these coffins still speak loudly from the silence of their shaft. Bunyip, water monster of the billabongs. The Australian outback stretches before you in ochre tones and eucalyptus scent. A billabong, an isolated waterhole, glistens in the sunlight, surrounded by reeds and gum trees. Aboriginal stories warn of a creature lurking in these waters, the Bunyip said, to emit ear-splitting shrieks and drag animals and people under. You crouch by the edge, listening to the drone of cicadas and the croak of frogs. Ripples spread across the water. Something moves beneath the surface. You journeyed here after a wildlife photographer sent you an audio file of a piercing cry recorded at dawn. The sound was unlike any known animal. He claimed to have seen a shadow with a back like a hump. He refused to come alone again. Intrigued by the mythical Bunyip and this modern testimony, you traveled inland, guided by indigenous elders who shared cautionary tales and insisted you respect the waterhole spirits. At dusk, mist rises from the billabong. You set up a thermal camera. A loud splash startles you. A large shape breaks the surface, then submerges, leaving only concentric circles. You glimpse slick fur and a pair of eyes glinting just above the water. Your heart races. A guttural bellow reverberates, vibrating the ground. The reeds rustle. The air grows heavy, filled with a musky odor. The water calms, but you sense you are being watched. Suddenly, a shriek pierces the night, the same sound as the audio file. It echoes across the valley, making your ears ring. You feel a wave of nausea. Birds take flight en masse. You pick up your equipment and step back. The elders motion for you to leave quietly. They sprinkle eucalyptus leaves into the water as offering. You retreat, adrenaline still coursing through your veins. In research, you learn that Bunyip stories vary. Some describe a seal-like creature, others a feathered beast or a giant starfish. Colonial records from the 19th century mention mysterious tracks, unfamiliar skulls, and unexplained drownings. Scientists suggest the Bunyip legend might derive from sightings of seals far inland or memories of extinct megafauna like the Diprotodon. Yet the sound you recorded does not match any animal call in databases. You wonder what still lurks in remote wetlands. Theories about the Bunyip range from misidentified known animals to psychological manifestations of fear around treacherous waters. Some think the legend served to protect sacred sites. A few propose that remnant populations of extinct species survive in isolated refuges. Skeptics dismiss recent reports as hoaxes. The Bunyip straddles the line between folklore and cryptozoology. Days later, you play back the recording in your hotel room. The shriek still raises goosebumps. Sometimes when you shower, you imagine eyes watching from the drain. The billabong stillness lingers in your mind. Whether or not a Bunyip exists, respect for those waters deepens and the elders' stories resonate. When you return to the city, fountains and ponds seem alive with hidden possibilities. Chupacabra, vampire of the night. The moon hangs high above the scrublands of Puerto Rico. Coqui frogs chirp, creating a wall of sound. Farmers have been finding their goats drained of blood puncture wounds on their necks. They whisper of the Chupacabra goat-sucker. You stand by a chain-link fence, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. The smell of dry grass and animal pens fills your nostrils. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barks. A sense of being watched creeps over you. You became involved when a veterinary friend asked for help after examining livestock carcasses with mysterious injuries. She had photographs showing clean punctures and no signs of struggle. The animals were completely exsanguinated. Rumors spread quickly, blaming supernatural predators. Authorities dismissed it as coyotes. Your friend believed something else was at play and asked you to document the phenomenon. You flew to the island with skepticism, but an open mind. You patrol the property with the farmer. Suddenly, his goats become restless. A rustling in the brush draws your attention. You train your light and catch a fleeting glimpse of a creature tall as a small child with spiky dorsal quills and glowing red eyes. It moves on two legs but drops to all fours in an instant. Its skin appears grayish, stretched tight over a gaunt frame. It stares at you for a heartbeat, then bounds into the undergrowth without making a sound. Your heart thumps. The farmer clutches his rosary. A blood-curdling screech pierces the night. You and the farmer follow, but only find a recently killed chicken. Its body still warm, 2 punctures on its neck. No blood. There are prints in the dirt, small clawed, unlike any known canine. The hair on your arm stands up. You collect the chicken for analysis, feeling uneasy. In the lab, your friend studies tissue samples. The puncture wounds are precise and lack tearing, unlike typical animal bites. Blood tests show anticoagulants in the victim's system. You research similar cases in Mexico and Texas. Reports spike every few years, often following viral media coverage. Biologists propose mange-ridden coyotes as culprits, noting that extreme parasite infestations can alter appearance. But the glowing eyes you saw do not fit those descriptions. Theories about the Chupacabra range from aliens to government experiments gone awry. Some believe the creature is a vampire bat mutated by chemical waste. Others think it is a psychological projection, a modern bogeyman feeding on fear and folklore. While scientists find rational explanations, eyewitness accounts often include supernatural elements. The tension between evidence and experience fuels the legend. Weeks later, back home, you wake at night convinced you hear a scratch at the window. Streetlights cast shadows that look like spines. You dream of creatures with glowing eyes circling your bed. You leave a glass of water on the porch, recalling how islanders leave offerings for spirits. Whether the Chupacabra is a physical animal or a fearsome story, it has left its mark on your psyche. When you see a goat now, you think of the 2 small punctures and the silent creature that disappeared into the night. Dyatlov Pass Incident, 1959. Footsteps into mystery. Snow crunches beneath your boots as you trek through the Ural Mountains under an overcast sky. The cold bites through layers of clothing. You follow a route once taken by 9 hikers in January 1959 whose mysterious deaths would capture the world's imagination. The pass is now called Dyatlov after the group's leader. The air smells clean with hints of pine. The landscape is bleak yet beautiful. You feel a prickling sensation on your neck, a mix of cold and anticipation. You joined this expedition at the invitation of a Russian film student working on a documentary. Her grandfather served in the search party that found the bodies. She carried his journal, which mentioned strange orange spheres in the sky, and in order to stay silent. She wanted someone outside Russia to help tell the story. You agreed, curious and wary. Now you slog through deep snow, carrying a tent and camera equipment, following the same trail the group once took. On the slope, you find the remains of the hikers' last camp, wooden poles, torn fabric. There are cut marks from the inside of the tent, indicating they fled in a hurry. Footprints lead into the forest barefoot or in socks despite sub-zero temperatures. The wind picks up. You hear a distant whoosh like jet engines. A strange light appears above the tree line, an orange glow that moves steadily across the sky. Your camera captures it. A chill that is not entirely from the weather runs down your spine. The wind suddenly shifts, carrying a low rumble. You feel pressure in your ears. Moments later, the sky darkens. Snow swirls wildly. The light fades. You hear creaking from the trees. Then everything goes still. The silence is palpable. You recall that some hikers had crushed ribs. Others were missing tongues, yet no signs of struggle were found. You wonder if an avalanche could explain the injuries, or if something more mysterious occurred. You feel watched, though no one is there. Back at base camp, you analyze the footage. The orange light resembles descriptions of fireballs seen by Soviet soldiers near the pass in 1959. Official records cite weather and misadventure, later updated to an avalanche. Some researchers propose infrasound produced by wind over the mountain triggered panic. Others note that traces of radioactivity were found on clothes. The film student tells you that her grandfather believed something fell from the sky. The pieces do not neatly align. Explanations vary. Avalanche, katabatic wind, military testing, escaped prisoners, Yetis, UFOs. Each theory has adherents. New computer simulations support an avalanche combined with unusual terrain. Skeptics of the paranormal scoff. Yet the unusual injuries, lack of soft tissue damage, and reports of glowing orbs keep the case open in the minds of many. The truth might be a confluence of natural forces and human error. As you leave the mountains, the wind picks up again. Snow whirls into spirals. You think you see figures moving between trees. It is probably your tired eyes. At night, the sound of wind through your hotel window mimics the whoosh you heard on the pass. You dream of running barefoot through snow, chased by an indistinct presence. You wake warm and safe, but the Ural wind still whispers outside, carrying unresolved questions with it. El Dorado, quest for the city of gold. Sunlight filters through a tangled canopy as you paddle a canoe along a slow Amazon tributary. The water is dark tea stained by leaves and secrets. Somewhere in these endless forests, Spanish conquistadors once believed a golden kingdom lay hidden. Birds screech above you, insects hum, humidity presses like a warm blanket. Your paddle dips silently, sending ripples across the surface. For centuries, explorers have searched for El Dorado, the gilded city of legend. As you drift deeper into the jungle, the lush green walls close in, and the myth begins to feel more tangible. A weathered postcard brought you here. It was tucked in a book about South American expeditions. On the back, in faded ink, was scribbled, "Found something. Can't tell anyone else. Meet at Leticia. Look for the carved macaw." Intrigued and skeptical, you flew to Colombia, followed clues through a bustling border town, and found yourself in a cafe decorated with carved macaws. There, an elderly man pressed a small gold-flecked rock into your hand and whispered coordinates deep in the rainforest. Curiosity overrode caution, and now you are on this river map folded in your pocket. Following the map, you beach the canoe and hack through dense vegetation. Ferns brush your arms. Unseen animals scurry away. The air smells of damp earth and decaying leaves. After hours, you stumble upon a stone terrace covered in vines. Steps carved into bedrock lead up to a platform. Carvings of animals and sun motifs decorate the stones. In the center of the platform lies a depression filled with gold dust glittering in dappled light. You touch the dust. It clings to your fingers. Your heart races. A low hum rises from the ground like distant chanting. A sudden roar erupts. A troop of howler monkeys scream above you, their cries echoing. The ground vibrates, leaves shudder. A gust of wind carries the scent of ozone. You hear a deep liquid gurgle from below the platform. The carved stones warm under your palms. For a moment you see shimmering shapes, towers and temples covered in gold overlaying the ruins. Your vision blurs, and the jungle around you seems to recede. Then the monkeys fall silent. The hum dies away, and the normal sounds return. You blink, unsure if you hallucinated. Back in Leticia, you share your findings with anthropologists. Historical records reveal that El Dorado may have referred not to a city, but to the ceremony of the Muisca people who covered their leader in gold dust and washed it off in Lake Guadavita. The Spanish, driven by greed, misinterpreted stories and searched for a non-existent city. Yet your discovery suggests there were ritual sites with considerable gold in remote areas. The glittering dust on your fingers hints at a belief system rather than a metropolis. Theories about El Dorado include the possibility that various cultures contributed to the legend. Some researchers think the Spanish conflated multiple stories of golden caches and temples. Others argue that smaller real settlements existed and were destroyed by disease and conquest. A fringe hypothesis suggests that indigenous groups created false trails to mislead invaders. Your experience with the stone platform implies something sacred rather than urban. Perhaps El Dorado was a state of mind or a ritual space. At night, you dream of rivers paved with gold, of being covered in powder that glows in moonlight. You wake with your hands shimmering with sweat. Sometimes when you look at polished brass fixtures, you see reflections of a jungle temple. The myth of El Dorado remains elusive and alluring. Even if no golden city lies hidden, the legend continues to entice explorers like you down winding waterways and into the heart of stories. Flannan Isles, Lighthouse Keepers, 100, lights gone out. The Atlantic is a gray expanse broken by jagged rocks as your boat approaches the Flannan Isles off Scotland's west coast. 3 islets rise from the waves carrying a solitary lighthouse that once protected mariners from the treacherous reefs. In December 1900, its keepers vanished without explanation. The tower stands silent. You can smell salt and kelp in the air. Gulls circle overhead, their cries sharp. The sense of isolation is complete. The nearest populated island is miles away. You were drawn here by a reference in an old maritime logbook purchased at a flea market. The logbook's last entry was from a relief vessel that landed to find the lighthouse empty, clocks stopped, meals untouched. Scribbled in the margin was a note, something in the water, singing. Intrigued by this cryptic detail, you arranged passage with local fishermen to the seldom visited isles. As your boat rocks in the swell, you clutch the logbook, its pages damp from sea spray. Climbing the steep steps to the lighthouse, you notice the door slightly ajar. Inside, the living quarters are sparse. A chair lies overturned. A plate of rusted cutlery sits on the table. A clock on the wall is stopped at 9:05. There is no sign of struggle, no blood. You climb the spiral staircase to the light chamber. The view is breathtaking, endless ocean, endless sky. On the railing, you find a rope coiled neatly. The journal of the headkeeper remains open, the last entry mentioning a storm. Outside, the sea is calm. A low moaning rises from the cliffs, almost like human voices singing far below. You peer over the edge. Waves crash against rock. The wind picks up, carrying the melody. Your skin crawls. Suddenly, a large wave drenches the lower landing. You stumble backward. The lighthouse seems to groan, its iron frame vibrating. The moaning intensifies, then stops. The wind drops to nothing. Only your heartbeat thuds in your ears. The experience leaves you shaken, unsure whether the song was wind, sea, or something else. Back on the mainland, you research the incident. Official explanations suggest the keepers were swept away by rogue waves while inspecting a supply crane on the cliffs. The island log records severe weather days prior. Yet questions linger. Why were their coats left behind? Why were 2 sets of oilskins missing while one remained? Some theories propose one keeper murdered the others and then jumped. Others speak of madness brought on by isolation. The song you heard mirrors 1900 newspaper rumors of mermaids luring sailors. The line between natural danger and supernatural allure blurs. Possible explanations include miscalculation of the sea's power, with all 3 men pulled into the water while rescuing equipment. Another theory suggests one man fell. The others attempted a rescue and were lost too. Some local folklore insists Selkies or water spirits took the men. A few fringe ideas hint at secret government experiments. In any case, the lack of bodies fuels mystery. Your own experience of the uncanny song adds another layer of intrigue. In the weeks after your visit, you sometimes hear a faint moaning when wind rushes around corners. You dream of climbing endless spiral stairs that never reach the top. The Flannan Isles remain remote and inhospitable, yet they draw the curious. Whether the keepers fell victim to waves or to something more ethereal, their disappearance underscores how small humans are against the ocean. Jersey Devil, legend of the Pine Barrens. Deep within New Jersey's Pine Barrens, tall pines block out sunlight. Sandy trails snake through cranberry bogs and cedar swamps. The air smells of resin and damp moss. Locals whisper about a creature that haunts these woods, the Jersey Devil said to have the head of a horse, wings of a bat, and cloven hooves. You walk alone, the crunch of pine needles underfoot the only sound. The forest is both peaceful and unsettling, every rustle raising expectations. Your presence here was prompted by a call from a park ranger reporting strange tracks near the Batstow village. He sent photographs showing hoofprints unlike any deer or horse. He also recorded an unearthly scream at dusk. He invited you to investigate before media swarmed. With gear and nerves, you drove down the Garden State Parkway and into the maze of sand roads. At dusk, a high-pitched shriek echoes across the trees. Your hair stands on end. You turn on your thermal camera and scan the brush. A heat signature appears moving quickly. You scramble through undergrowth, heart racing. Suddenly in the clearing, you catch a glimpse of something leaping, a dark shape with wings beating against the night. The creature disappears between pines. A sulfurous smell lingers. The ground is marked with hoofprints deeper than a deer's spaced far apart. A branch snaps behind you. You whirl around, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness. 2 red eyes reflect back at you from high in a tree. They blink, and a heavy thud hits the ground. You hold your breath. The eyes disappear. Silence returns. You can hear your own pulse. Suddenly the shriek repeats closer, then fades as if carried away by wind. You retreat to your vehicle, adrenaline surging. Over coffee with the ranger, you discuss possibilities. The legend traces back to the 1700s when Mother Leeds supposedly gave birth to a cursed 13th child. Reports of a flying creature appear every few decades. Biologists propose misidentified barn owls or sandhill cranes. Hoaxes and tall tales abound. Yet the tracks you saw and the thermal footage defy easy explanation. The ranger confides that seasoned hunters report strange encounters they will not share publicly. Theories include deformed livestock, escaped circus animals, or collective folklore used to keep children from wandering. Some suggest the creature is an embodiment of the barrens themselves, reflecting settlers' fears of the unknown. Skeptics cite the lack of physical evidence. Your own experience falls somewhere between rational and mystical. After leaving, you find yourself uneasy around forests. The sound of a distant train whistle resembles the Jersey Devil's scream. A decoration in a roadside diner, half horse, half bat, makes you smile nervously. The Pine Barrens legend persists because it taps into primal fears and regional pride. Whether a flesh and blood creature or a living story, the Jersey Devil remains part of the landscape's identity. Mary Celeste, brigantine, without a crew, the Atlantic swells rise and fall as you stand aboard a 19th century replica ship moored in Hoboken. The story you are revisiting unfolded in 1872 when the Mary Celeste was found adrift near the Azores, its cargo and provisions intact, but crew gone. The brig's sails flapped lazily, lifeboat missing. You walk the deck, tar scent mingling with salt air. Wooden planks creak. You imagine the eerie silence that met the sailors who boarded the ghost ship over a century ago. Your interest rekindled when a maritime historian sent you a transcription of Captain Benjamin Briggs's diary, newly discovered in an attic trunk. The last entry mentioned his wife having a premonition of disaster. Another note in a different hand described strange lights dancing on the horizon days before the disappearance. You traveled to Boston to meet the historian and examine the fragile pages. He suggested visiting a brigantine to absorb the atmosphere before writing. Climbing to the quarterdeck, you flip through the diary pages. Briggs wrote of a foul smell from the cargo of denatured alcohol, waterlogged decks, and his daughter playing near the binnacle. The last entry is calm, yet the margin contains scrawled words. All is not as it seems. Suddenly, a distant foghorn bleats. Your attention snaps up. A cold wind sweeps across the deck. For a moment, you catch a whiff of something sweet like spilled liquor. The rigging creaks as if under strain. You feel uneasy. Later, you visit a maritime museum. Exhibits list theories abounding, a squall causing water to gush over the deck, leading the crew to panic and abandon ship. Fumes from leaking alcohol exploding, prompting evacuation. Pirates mutiny giant octopi. A modern analysis suggests Briggs may have taken to the lifeboat temporarily and died when the tow rope broke. The cargo was salvaged. No lifeboat was found. The family's premonitions add an eerie element. Conjecture continues. Some propose that seaquake phenomena generated currents that made the ship appear to sink. Others cite aliens or sea monsters. The diary margin note could mean Briggs suspected sabotage. Even straightforward explanations leave questions. Why no distress signals? Why were the sails trimmed? The Mary Celeste floats through history as an unsolved riddle. When walking along modern marinas, you sometimes smell spilled spirits and glance at empty boats, wondering about missing crew. On foggy mornings, masts appear ghostly. The Mary Celeste remains symbolic of maritime mystery, a vessel that delivered her cargo, but not her people, leaving their fates to the imagination. Akhenaten's strange disappearance. The vanishing pharaoh. The afternoon sun blazes over the ruins of Amarna, turning mud brick walls the color of baked clay. You walk through deserted streets where the city built for the god Aten once thrived. There are no temple priests now, only scattered foundations and shards of pottery. Birds circle overhead, cawing in the thermals. You cannot help feeling that this place was abandoned in haste. Even the inscriptions on the palace floors remain crisp. A faint breeze blows dust into your eyes, and for a moment the empty doorways seem like pupils staring back. You did not plan to come to Amarna. A faded travel journal found in a second-hand bookstore described a sealed chamber under the royal tombs with an unfinished inscription about Akhenaten. The writer claimed that voices whispered inside and that he had to flee. Intrigued by his descriptions, you booked a flight and now stand at the edge of the royal wadi, your backpack heavy with flashlights and notebooks. The path into the cliffs beckons like a gash in the landscape. The tomb's entrance is carved low in the limestone hillside. You crouch to enter, breathing the cold air that spills outward. A descending corridor painted with sun discs leads to a hall where unfinished figures were abruptly abandoned. The walls are smooth as if something erased the chisel marks. Ahead, a dark passage branches off, not noted on any official map. You shine your torch into the darkness and see a door blocked by rubble. The journal describes a crawl space behind that rubble. The stone grinds under your fingers as you pull away blocks, exposing a black void. Inside, the air tastes metallic. Dust motes drift like galaxies in the beam of your light. On the far wall, faint hieroglyphs hint at a narrative. You see Akhenaten's elongated face carved in low relief. Then a line of symbols abruptly stops mid-sentence. You touch the wall and feel a vibration, as if a distant drum is beating. Suddenly the temperature drops, your breath fogs and the hairs on your arms rise. A whisper slithers past your ear in a language no longer spoken. The beam flickers. For a second you perceive a silhouette, a man with a long crown standing beneath a sun disk. Then it vanishes. The ground begins to vibrate. Dust falls from the ceiling. You back away as a low hum builds to a crescendo. It feels as though the rock itself is resonating with some ancient chant. Your flashlight dies, momentarily plunging you into total darkness. In that blindness, you sense movement around you, a hand brushing your shoulder, a figure passing through the corridor. The hum reverberates in your chest until you fear your ribcage will splinter. When the light flickers back on, the chamber appears unchanged, but your heart races and sweat pools in your palms. Back at camp, you pore over academic papers and old letters. You learn that Akhenaten's mummy has never been found. Some scholars suggest his remains were moved, perhaps to protect them from enemies. Others believe his body was deliberately destroyed in an act of damnatio memoriae. There are records of a swift succession of rulers after his death and many changes to official art. The more you read, the more you sense a conspiracy of silence. The phantom you saw in the tomb seems less like a ghost and more like a memory that refuses to be laid to rest. Theories about Akhenaten's disappearance abound. Some imagine he fled into exile and died in obscurity, buried without royal honors. Others speculate that his body was hidden by loyalists and later reused for another pharaoh's burial. A small group of researchers points to DNA studies suggesting that the mummy in KV-55 could be him, though its identity is contested. There is even a fringe idea that he was assassinated by his own priests. Each scenario seems plausible, yet incomplete, like a hieroglyph missing a determinative. Sometimes when you close your eyes, you hear that hum again and feel the cool damp of the tomb air. In your peripheral vision, the elongated face of Akhenaten flashes across mirrors and windows. You wonder if his memory has attached itself to you, unwilling to fade. On the flight home, the engine drones at a frequency strangely similar to the vibrational chant. You grip the armrest and stare at the clouds, uncertain whether you ever really left Amarna.